Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
We are going to talk today about the intervention strategies of organization development, and we are going to structure it at 3 levels: individual, group and interpersonal interventions. We have maintained through these sessions that the important thing in organization management is not just to understand it, which it is, but the complete important activity includes interventions and getting it closer to where you want a system to be. There is always a gap between where you are and where you want to be, at least there should be. If there is no difference between your reality and aspiration, well, then either you are divine consciousness or you are a cabbage. I do not know which one you would want to be or which one you can be, but anything which comes between being a cabbage and being divine consciousness is less than perfect and should have some aspiration to improve. Only divine consciousness is perfect, and only a cabbage would have no aspirations. I would like to believe that most living human beings are somewhere between the two. Therefore, there is forever an effort between where you are and where you want to be. This is not just in a material sense, this is also in the sense of evolution. The evolution of your consciousness, the evolution of your sensitivity, getting over your imperfections, and for that also you need interventions. For those people who live their life at a more materialistic level, there is always a better quality of life. There is always the issue of quality time, because it is assumed that once you have achieved perfection, then you have merged into the total entity of the universal energy. So, it is necessary to understand what interventions can be about. How do you get to be a better person? How do you organize better interpersonal relationships? How do you organize better group functioning? And we are going to leave the more esoteric questions out of the discussion, because this is not really a session on philosophy, though a reference to it is necessary to understand what interventions are all about. We are going to focus more on the organizational aspects, and we are going to talk more of the way organizations function and the interventions which are needed, better organizations of already good organizations and or organizations which are not working very well. How do you improve them? So, that is what we are going to talk about. So, the focus is on yourself, because you can't really change anyone else. It is one of the false fantasies of people that they think they can change anyone. Nobody changes anyone. People change only when they wish to change themselves, and please take it as an axiom. We do not have the time to discuss this paradigm, but the very fact of an instruction is you put across certain things as a paradigm and you accept that as a platform for further discussion. So, how do you get to be a better person? Because it is only a better person who will make a better manager. You can't be a better manager without being a better human being. It is utterly impossible. And what may appear as a successful manager may not be that much of a success, because it will not be enduring success. So, again the second hypothesis, and that is a paradigm which has to be accepted. You can't be a good manager without being a good human being, and this is not open to discussion. The second issue which then arises is, since all of us are gregarious animals, and that is one of the definitions of the Homo sapien, you need people. Solitary confinement does not lead to organizational life, and all of us need an organizational life. There is the story of a person who took a bet with a very rich man, and the bet was, and it is a Russian story done by Anton Chekhov. Of living in solitary confinement for 19 years, and if he lived there successfully, he would get 10 million or 10 billion rubles, whatever the figure was, it was astronomical. And there was only one catch in it. He had the keys to the lock, so he could open the lock whenever he wanted and walk out. And he writes his diary over the years, and the first year he spends gloating about what he would do with the 10,000 million rubles or trillion rubles, whatever the figure was. As I said, the only thing to remember is astronomical. And then he graduates to another mental level, and he wonders whether that was the best use of money. Then yet there is another level, and he wants to spend it for social good, for something which would be enduring, something which would make him immortal. And gradually he realizes that nothing is worth chasing. And by the time he is in the 19th year, he says, what am I going to do with all this money? It is of no use. And just one day before he is to complete 19 years, he opens his own lock and walks away with a note written. And the note read, you can do whatever you want with the money, you deserve that money, I have no use of it. I think I have been made a better human being by these years of solitary confinement, and I know what reality is. If ultimately then a philosophical evolution gives to you the meaninglessness of life, then that is another paradigm altogether. But beyond making of a better person, there are the issues of interpersonal dynamics, because people need company, people can't be alone. And that story I consider very powerful, because it brings out what solitary confinement, what solitude does to a person. So, we are talking of the normal human beings again who need company. And then finally, there is the issue of group dynamics. All of us live in groups. Family is a group, the department is a group, the division is a group, the organization is a group, and ultimately your happiness is determined by the way you relate to the group. You may choose to resist it. You may choose to reform it. You may choose to fall in place. You may choose to follow the more powerful man and get your things done. But in each case, the balance sheet is roughly the same. There is a lot of unhappiness, there is a lot of happiness. And no matter how you play it, there will be certain things making you totally unhappy. And of course, some happiness will come your way. Life, as somebody once explained to me, is forever a mixed bag. So, whatever you do in life, it is a mixed bag. There are some pluses and there are some minuses. When you talk of intervention strategies, you are always thinking of instruments which make the situation better to your liking. So, this session is devoted to instruments of intervention, which is why it is called intervention strategies for organization development, individual, group and interpersonal interventions. And I am going to talk specifically of the interventions. I am not going to talk of philosophy anymore, though it is important to understand that all good management is always good philosophy. There is no such thing as good management with no good philosophy. The first question, which by definition arises, is when are interventions required? Now, the interventions are required whenever there is a technology assessment and diversification. You change the nature of technology, you upgrade technology, and you need an intervention. Because this takes us to one of the key theories of organization management, the socio-technical system. You can't operate an organization without technology. It is one of my assumptions that all organizations, and please note my emphasis, all organizations either are technologically driven or technologically determined. You can't run an organization without technology. You have got to learn to live with technology. Now, whether you are for it, against it, whether you are denying it, whether you are loving it, is a matter of personal choice, but it will be there. I have only developed this to a higher level of sophistication, but the seeds have been around for decades, and one of the most common assumptions made in us analyzing an organization is the socio-technical system. And we have referred to this earlier on. A socio-technical system is what runs an organization. You have the technology and you have the social system which runs the technology. So, technology will not operate unless there is capability to operate it. Goes back to two of our favorite words, if you remember, discipline and capability. And no matter what end of the political spectrum you belong, from extreme right to extreme left, no matter what is your political persuasion, no matter what is your ego level, whether you think you run the world or whether you feel the world trounces on you, you can't but ultimately begin to realize that you are what you are because of the capability which you have. Everything else is false, and this cannot be repeated often enough. Everything else, including your father's surname which you may carry, and he may be the most powerful man on the planet, will be at the end of the day only a good passport. So, being a part of the decision making process, being a part of the political process, getting a patron saint for you, getting whatever works, but it goes only so far, no further. At the end of the day, you will be standing on the two legs God gave you, and at the end of the day, you are worth what your capabilities are. The rest may carry you forward for a few minutes, for a few hours, for a few months. It may be even carry you forward for a few years. So, there is no question of inheriting a legacy only because you are born into a family. You will have to maintain that legacy. Now, I know that's an unusual take on the whole discussion which goes around on, legacies and inheritance and whatever, dynasties and whatever else, but dynasties have died. Dynasties won't live if they weren't capable people to maintain that dynasty. So, let us clear our blinkers from political predispositions. Let us look at the issues managerially. And understanding a perspective managerially is important to understanding organization management, because that is what organization management is all about. So, my first submission to you is intervention is necessary whenever technology changes. Technology may change because of many reasons. Technology may change because the source of energy has changed. It may have moved from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy. It may have moved from one kind of material to another kind of material. It may have moved from one kind of flow of material in the manufacturing process to another kind of flow. And I do not want to convert this into a session on how many different types of technology there can be. But one thing which you should be knowing, even in a smelter, if there is a break in the flow of molten material, that causes a definite break in one type of technology to another type of technology. and it caters to accidents, it can cater to efficiency, it can cater to all types of situations. The organizations need to create a social system which operates that technology. So, whenever you change a technology, you change the intervention system. The second is continual changes. Change are inherent. Take away 10 years from whatever is your age today and you will see the change in you. Your physical structure would have changed, your dietary habits would have changed, your diurnal habits would have changed. By diurnal, I mean daily habits. You may be looking more handsome, you may be looking less handsome, but you will not be looking the same. So, how do you move the inert to the live? By an intervention. For those of you who know Bombay, there was a time when Worli was nothing more than a middle class habitat with a lot of textile mills. And these textile mills, in their turn, employed a lot of workers. And because of these workers, there was a huge human population there which supplied labor to the domestic use. The social composition of Worli was different. Then came the Datta Samant strike, and a lot of mills there were closed down. The numbers vary from 80 to over 100. And the social composition of Worli began to change. Not only did it begin to change, but all the mills disappeared. And the mills were, many of them were pulled down, converted into real estate. And you saw towers coming up. And next to the Pedder Road, the high and mighty started moving in there. With the result that today, for a very large social segment of Worli, no domestic servants are available unless you are providing them accommodation, unless they are settled in the same building, and unless you are paying them far more than your grandmother ever paid. It is a change which has taken place. Worli of 2010 is not the Worli of 1980. And even the span of 3 decades that I am giving you is a very generous span. The mills which did not transform themselves were incapable of meeting the strike, were incapable of meeting the technological change in the textile industry, are now buried. So, the second kind of change is continual changes. So, you need interventions to adjust to those technological changes. Organizations failing to perform well for a long time. You see, the fond notion that business will be as usual is a great myth. If one thing which is never constant, it is business. So, I do not know where the expression business as usual came up, because there is no such thing as business as usual. Business will be either going up or going down. One more of the many sentences which at least baffle me, and I have given you the series. The belief that time is passing, and I told you time never passes, you pass. You are the one who began at a given point of time, you are the one who will die. So, how is time passing? Time is constant, time is eternal, yet human beings say time is passing. Oh dear, what a pity. They never say I am passing. The second one is get up at sunrise. Sun never rises. Your earth rotates. You are the one who does the rising. You are the one who does the setting. And there are many quips like that. I don't know how many of you know about the quip on the British Empire. Yes, that was a fond statement of the great Winston Churchill, whose hate for India is now in the public domain. He had his reasons. We are not going to discuss that. But he is credited with the statement, this is an empire on which the sun never sets. So, the historian came back with the quip, till it sets forever. Now, there are a lot of puns on the sun, we can't go discussing all that. So, the next statement which I will add to the series, business as usual. What is the usual? Like say, give me the best practices. What are the best practices? I don't know. I know consultants are hired to teach the best practices, which means what? Practices which worked for some successful firms. But my body is different. What worked for the treatment of another body may not work for me at all. So, what is the point of learning best practices? But this whole profession is so infested with illusions, like many other professions, that you can't cure them all. So, there is no such thing as business as usual. What happens is everything changes, and if everything is changing, then if your organization is failing to perform well, you need interventions. Please realize, irrespective of the share markets, irrespective of any other market rating which you may think of, unless the customer is voting for you with a rupee, you are not in business. It's simple as that. Every time he buys your product, he is voting with his rupee, and he will not vote for it if your goods are shoddy. He will change his taste, because there are very few goods which are needed for survival. So, interventions are needed when organizations are failing to perform well. Change in top management. Now, this is very important. Each CEO has his own assumptions about management. Whenever the boss changes, the team changes. And even if the team does not change, the style changes. They all pretend there will be no change, but they all change it. If you are smart, you do it in a quiet way. If you are dumb, you do it in a noisy way. If your inheritance is weak, you still play along, because even that weak inheritance has stakeholders. Somebody was profiting by that weakness, and you can't disturb the power equation without having an alternate power equation to set in place. And human beings are very subtle. They always and invariably work for their own benefit, and therefore, they are smart enough to find the logic to justify it. There was a wise gentleman who once quipped to me on a decision which he wanted to take, and I had some doubts about. And I told him, sir, don't you think the rules will not permit it? He says, rules? What are you talking about? Rules are made to keep out those whom we do not want. Anyone who is powerful really does what he wants, and he does it legally. He finds exceptions, he justifies it, will say it is in public interest, will say this is what the situation demands. He will say the times have changed, therefore, the rules have to be redrafted. Ultimately, if you go back to something which I was telling you in the previous session, whether you choose from Marx or Freud or Adler, Mr. Adler is always there. Even in a Freudian relationship, you want to dominate your partner, and you want to dominate your partner in very subtle and not so subtle ways. It is there in all literatures. I know Sanskrit is banned as a classical language, it is not even recognized, but notwithstanding that, Sanskrit has survived for over 10,000 years and will survive for many millennia more. It has some literature which has an edifying influence as only Sanskrit literature could have. It could only compare with Greek or Latin literature there. And you read Kalidas in Ritu Sanghar, you would know what Freud is all about. And you see the power syndrome coming in. So, ultimately, who writes the rules? It is the powerful who write the rules. How many people have considered that India's dominance in hockey started declining the day a group of countries got together and rewrote the rules of the game? Nobody realized it. And Indians were, as usual, discussing religion, caste, community, who is the Bada Sahab of the locality, who is the Bada Admi. I mean, God bless us. And the carpet was pulled beneath our feet, and after having won the Olympic medal for n number of times, we discovered we did not even figure in the select list. The rules had been changed. And please remember, rules are always written by the powerful. Organization management is also a dynamics which focuses on the power game. What becomes legal? What the rule says. Who writes the rules? The powerful writes the rule. And what will the powerful write? What it suits him. Therefore, the struggle is to fill that slot. And you will notice, as usual, I am struggling assiduously from desisting from striking any value judgment. All of you will decide for yourselves. All of you would decide for yourself whether this is something right or this is something wrong. All of you will decide for yourself what side of the game you want to be in. All of you will decide for yourself how you want to bat, but bat you will have to. Then, as I was talking to you about change in top management, attrition of key persons. The key person goes, style changes. And we have already referred to style and structure in a previous session. In a nutshell, interventions are required when some goals are not being met and when there are some unwanted symptoms. This is the definition which sums up all that has been elaborated so far. An intervention is required when some goals are not being met and when there are some unwanted symptoms. Then you select an intervention which has to do with the malaise or the situation, as it is called in management, that you seek to improve. And how do you improve that situation? You improve that situation by a synergy between the diagnosis of the problem and the competencies of the intervention strategies. Even there is a competency requirement. If you write the wrong prescription, the ailment decides an alkaline intervention and you write an acidic intervention, you have damaged the treatment. Last evening, a CEO of a major private sector conglomerate was talking to me, has been having trouble with the lungs. And the issue was very simple. He had urinary tract infection. Went for treatment, obviously with the most competent people, was given a series of antibiotics. The dosage was improper. It left patches on the lungs. Now, to treat those patches on the lungs, he has to continue with the treatment of antibiotics, which if he continues, the lungs will get perforated. Now, you do not have to know medicine to understand what I am talking about. What you have to understand is, and the message is, if you do not diagnose a problem properly, the intervention can be counterproductive. Even if it is technically correct, the quantum is important. I know of another case, somebody underwent a treatment for typhoid. Overdosage caused impaired hearing. And I am sure all of you know what happened with wrong diagnosis or wrong medicine or wrong dosage or bad dosage. Now, many of us are votaries of allopathic system of medicine, and like in anything else, I would say God bless you. I bless anyone who wants to do a thing and says, yes, I want to do it. You have every right to experiment with yourself. That's the only right you have fundamentally, to keep experimenting, but then be prepared to pay the price for it. Because nature comes back with a vengeance, and then you get punished or rewarded as per what you did. If only human beings realized the consequences of their acts, they wouldn't, in many cases. And even if only if people realize the consequences of their act, they would, because they would see the benefits. It is only when one doesn't understand the consequences that one takes the fatal step, which almost and often verges on self-destruction. So, ultimately it goes back to the truth which I was trying to emphasize in the beginning. Ultimately, you are your own evidence, you are your own testimony, you are your own victim, and you are your own victim. Nobody is going to pay for what you did, save you. And if your attitude about your own acts is, it doesn't matter, sure, go ahead, see what the consequences would be. So, if this is the intervention philosophy, you will have to understand first and foremost which are the goals which are not being met and which are the unwanted symptoms. The interventions have specific activities that result from the process of diagnosis and feedback. I have just explained that. Is any defect directed towards improving organizational effectiveness that disrupts an organization's normal way of operating? Now, if this is so, you have already got a diagnosis of altering things towards what they should be. It sometimes involves consultant from outside the organization. More often than not, consultants are butt end of the jokes, not because they do a bad job invariably, but there are many people within the organizations who believe they know the organizations better than the outsiders do. In fact, it would be a good idea for anybody who is a consultant, who aspires to be a consultant, not to walk into a consulting relationship unless he is absolutely sure that the organization is going to be receptive. Because knowledge-ware is the only ware to which everyone lays claims, and everyone is accepted with those claims depending upon the kind of promotion he can make for his own skills. To just take the discussion further, it will be useful to refer to some other scholars in this context, and Chris Argyris said, to intervene is to enter into an ongoing system of relationship to come between or among persons, groups or objects for the purposes of helping them. What is left unstated is helping them to improve. Requirements for successful interventions are the intervener must have valid and useful information. He must have free choice. You can't hire a consultant to write out the prescription which is on your mind. In fact, an intervention initiator should have the choice of initiating that intervention if he is to be effective. You can't write the prescription for him. And of course, there has to be an internal commitment that you want to make it work. He may write whatever prescription you want. If you don't take the medicine, you can't hold the consultant responsible. So, there is always an issue of trying to understand what was your response to the prescription given to you. And I've heard very often, and by very often I mean oftener than I would like to hear it, CEOs of organizations telling the consultant, your consultancy has done me no good. Now, that is a pretext for not making the payment. Fine. What is not written is, did you follow the prescription? Did you give it a try? So, this is a very dicey area. Who initiates the intervention? Who carries it forward? Who is responsible for the adequacy of the intervention? Unfortunately, areas of thought which are not very often given the attention which they should. So, intervention strategies cannot be just a toolbox. Intervention strategies are also an application, and there are certain prerequisites and consequences of that application, and that again is a behavioral issue. So, do not listen to the instruments as I elaborate them to you merely as equations, a toolbox. It is not open to everyone for using the toolbox. You need certain felicity to use that toolbox. It is not everyone's game, and I will be only selecting a brief list which can be covered within the time frame. It is not as if these are the only interventions and there are no other interventions possible. But before we get there, it is important to understand what intervention is supposed to do. Interventions aim at fulfilling organizational goals relating to the three dimensions of organizational effectiveness: task dimension, behavioral dimension, adaptation capabilities. Through interventions, you can alter the nature of the tasks. Through interventions, you can alter people's behavior on the job. You will not create a new man, but you can alter his behavior on the job. Like for example, people come late, you shut the door, people get the message, they do not come. Now, it is important to understand they have not been cured of coming late. Given half an opportunity, they will again be late. But what you have done is improve the organizational dimension, and those who come late do not disrupt the people's work who were on time. Therefore, it is a qualitative improvement. An illustration to say that you can alter the behavioral dimensions. But while talking of behavioral dimensions, you have noticed that I was quick to say people's behavior can be changed with reference to the tasks at hand, and that is worth a shot. Then adaptation of capabilities. You have to learn to grow. Growth is inherent to survival. There has been a quotation which has gone around. And you know from which movie. You belong to the Jurassic Park. That is an understatement. There is no such thing as a Jurassic Park. There is only the cemetery or the cremation. Because the Jurassic Park will not be able to work for its own survival. You can write good fiction about it, but there are no Jurassic Parks. Yes, if you are living in an antedated civilization, you are going to be the victim of predators. People will come and scrounge off you. They will scrounge off your resources, they will scrounge off your abilities, they will scrounge off whatever you have. And that is the only fate of civilizations which get left behind in the battle for survival. The idyllic state of nature, where the prehistoric animals still walked, and I do not want to name any of them because I respect them all, they went extinct because they became irrelevant. The dinosaurs was a very important link in the growth of the living species. And the theory is it became extinct because its whole body grew, its head did not. Therefore, the brain remained small, the body became huge, and while its tail was in danger, it took so much time for the threat perception to travel to the brain, and the brain giving the command, for the tail to move and the muscles to comply, that in that time period the tail had already been chopped off. Now, is anyone surprised that you don't find them anymore around? Speed is a very important ingredient of survival. If you can fire 6 shots in the time another person is loading his gun, then the person who is loading the gun has no chance of a survival. So, you can't position yourself with reference to adaptation as per a philosophical choice. And organizations which don't grow, the management quip is they belong to the Jurassic Park. I think that again needs to be modified. They don't belong to the Jurassic Park. There is no such thing as an organization Jurassic Park. Nobody will come to them. Therefore, it is important to be conscious of the need to adapt capabilities. Attributes that the OD practitioner introduces in an organized setting are set of values. Integrity is a value, it is a managerial value. You can't have quality without integrity. The entire ISO movement is just about integrity. ISO movement is not a quality movement, that is a misnomer. ISO movement is a credibility movement. Even if you are producing 5th rate stuff and you pronounce that you are going to produce 5th rate stuff, you will get your ISO certification. All they want is do what you say and say what you do. Good enough. And I think that is fair. At least you are fooling nobody. And if after proclaiming that you are making 5th rate stuff, people still want to buy you and your products, fair and square. You have earned your money. Set of assumptions. All of us have our set of assumptions on everything. From doesn't matter, it works, doesn't really affect the results, and every other thing, on every other dimension. Organization intervention is about healthy set of assumptions. And by healthy set of assumptions, I mean positive assumptions. By that I mean assumptions which create a better organization qualitatively. You are taught the right things. And what are the right things? Credibility, dependability, say what you do what you say, and the works. They intervene for personal and organizational goals. You cannot create goals beyond what the organization has given to itself. Organizational goals are sacrosanct. That is what the organizational choice was. And finally, it gives you a choice of variety of structures, activities, techniques. Interventions need to be classified based on organizational unit of analysis and systems variables. There are individual interventions, there are interpersonal interventions, there are group interventions, intergroup interventions, then of course the act of intervention itself, organizing interventions. I have already elaborated upon it, it speaks for itself. Interventions discussed in this session will include Joe-Harry window, Myers-Briggs type of indicators, transactional analysis, managerial grid, third party intervention, survey feedback. They will be done in an illustrative manner. It will not make you scholars in practicing these interventions. Please get it clear. Listening to how I elaborate it and how I explain it only gives you the competency to understand what it is about. It does not, I repeat, make you an amateur consultant. But then a course of this order does seek to create in you a sensitization of what the issues are. I will be also discussing the interventions which are related to the quality circles, small group activity and the Six Sigma task force, because this again is a very fashionable intervention. You have people who claim to be Six Sigma specialists. So, once I asked, why can't it be 7 sigma? And you will be amused to know the answer, just as there isn't a 10th planet. I said, oh my God, I didn't know Navagrahas had been accepted so universally that you are comparing 6 sigmas to the Navagrahas. I thought the entire scientific method was created to poo-poo astrology. He says, no. 6 sigma has proved that there are only 6. Now, whether they will remain 6 or become 9, I have no means of predicting. I was not trained into astrology, but I can only teach you 6 sigma the way the masters of 6 sigma claim they practice it. Let us get to the Joe-Harry window. It was designed by Joe Luft and Harry Ingramin. I know there are very many puns which go about Johari Saab. I am not referring to any of it. I am referring to just Joe-Harry window, which is a combination of Joe and Harry spelt as H-A-R-I. It addresses the evaluation of the work group. It stresses the criticality of open and honest communication. You see, ultimately it keeps coming back to the same keywords. Everyone wants the other person to be open, everyone wants the other person to be honest, everyone wants the other person to have integrity, everyone wants the other person to be credible. Nobody wants to be oneself. And the reason is very simple, because one considers oneself smarter than the rest of the world put together. So, if you are smarter than the rest of the world put together, it is for the other person to be honest. You can get away with whatever, because you are so smart. I am sorry, I say that with utmost reverence, and I might say deference, because all of us lie. The difference is only on the quantum and the frequency. But I have yet to meet a person who does not lie. And what is the assumption of lying? The other person is an idiot, I am smarter than that, I will get away with it. Nobody would ever lie if he suspected that the other person is smarter and he will see through the lie. I was this Dashara traveling Bombay, Delhi, and as chance would have it, a cabinet minister came and sat next to me. And he wanted me to vacate the seat because he wanted somebody else to sit there. But he wouldn't ask for it. The person who wanted me to vacate the seat did. So I said, the honorable minister can ask me, and he didn't like it at all. So the conversation rolled on. I did say that we have met before, and I cited him to the occasion, and the minister was so ragged, he said, no, I don't remember it at all. I said, that's natural, you meet so many people, how could you remember a small person of my description? So the first round he won. The second round, The person then came to him and said, sir, I have got a seat next to me on the 7th row, would you like to come behind? So the minister said, I'll think about it. So I said, look, sir, if it is so very important, I could happily go down. No, I don't want any help. So I said, okay. And then he went on to say, you see, actually, we weren't talking because I have been traveling. I have to travel. So 40 seconds later, I said, oh, I believe you will be traveling, so it's important for you to have the conversation. He says, no. I did not say I have to travel. I said I have been traveling. There is a difference. I said, sorry, sir, I sometimes do get my tense mixed up. To which he said, no, I was very clear. So I said, we had met in February. He said, do you mean to say that I have been traveling since February till now? I said, what are you getting worked up about? I don't understand. Where is this conversation leading us? Maybe it's all my mistake. I'm so sorry. Oh, that's all right. But I'm quite sure what I said. And he just went on with that. When the seat belt sign was off, I got up, approaching the seat when this person came out of the front of the cabin loo, and I said, the seat is all yours, with my compliments. To which the minister tried to protest, but by which time the gentleman who was supposed to occupy my seat was so happy to get it, he was not giving the minister any chance to get him out and get me back. No judgments at all. But a narration to show how even the high and mighty of a land ultimately in a transaction work on the assumption, I am superior to you. Why do I underscore the high and mighty of the land? Because I went to a school where I was taught, when you are the high and mighty of the land, you get there only because you are polite, humble, a growing person. And I realized I had been taught all the wrong things. Because people without any of these qualities can arrive there. What is the relevance of taking it into a Joe Harry window? I'll ultimately give you a grid. Don't expect the other person to be honest if you are not being honest. That's the message. Don't expect the other person to disclose if you are not disclosing. Why do you think the other person is a fool? The other person doesn't know his tense, but you do. And in that very cabin, there was one ex-governor who had also a former cabinet minister and another serving governor. And I could see that the former cabinet minister and the governor was utterly without company. And when we got out at the Delhi airport, he didn't have a private vehicle. Wouldn't this cabinet minister reach that stage sooner or later? What am I saying? A certain cyclical view of life helps you to manage power far better. Power, like beauty, is passing. But wisdom, like integrity, is enduring. And at your stage of understanding organizations, I want to emphasize these principles into your getting to grasp what are the foundations of a sound organization. If the Tatas evoke a brand name, and I am not going to discuss an analysis of whether it is right or wrong, I am not here to do a critique. The truth is Tatas does evoke a brand name. And if anyone were to ask what is it all about, the first word would be credibility. And for those of you who are aware of the pedigree of the house of Tatas, there is no such thing as the house of Tatas anymore. The name continues, but that's about all. What was the success of Hindustan Levers in this country at a time when multilaterals were not even born here? And I happened to be discussing this with an outstanding figure in the field of marketing, and I feel honored to go public in acknowledging my respect and regard for him, Dr. N.C.B. Nath. And I asked Dr. Nath, "Sir, what would be the defining characteristic of a Hindustan Lever's executive as against any other executive of any other organization in India, if some creature from Mars arrived and in a cocktail conversation there were 3 people talking and it was his brief to identify the Hindustan Lever's man?" And I have documented this conversation, it has been published. And Dr. Nath said, he appreciated the question, and he said, "You could trust the Hindustan Lever's man to give you an honest answer." And in the days of the license Raj, he cited how the government, when they needed some information on corporate affairs, would call Hindustan Levers to understand what corporate affairs patterns were like. That is the value of openness. That's the value of disclosure. That's the value of credibility. And I want to leave none of you who are hearing this in any doubt about it. Therefore, Johari window addresses itself to the evolution of the working group. It stresses the criticality of open and honest communication. Satyam vada, dharmang chara. These are the 2 principles on which, whether it be Hinduism, whether it be Buddhism, be it any religion, religions which have survived hundreds of years, believe me, have not survived because they walk on the sword. No, nothing would survive only if it walked on the sword. Anything which has survived the test of time, believe me, has survived because it stands forth for certain noble principles. You take it from me. While talking of information systems, one principle which I hold out to my listeners is, if you see a stack of papers which you haven't used for 25 years, you can safely throw it away. You don't even have to read it. Don't waste your time screening it. If you haven't used it for 25 years, the chances of your ever using it are very remote. Similarly, if something has survived for 500 years, you can take it that there is something to recommend it. It could be just banal. So, Johari window, again of the grid I was talking of, suppose the x-axis is self, y-axis is others, known to others, known by self, unknown to others, unknown by oneself. So, there are 2 variables about self, known and unknown, 2 variables about others, known and unknown, and here we go about the matrix. If you are known by others and known yourself, that is the ideal, that is the arena. But if you are known by others and unknown to self, you are blind. Everyone knows it about you, only you don't. If it is unknown to others and known by self, you have closed the windows. The others don't know it, but you do. But the beauty is unknown to oneself and unknown to others. Nobody knows what's happening. It's total dark. So, the choice is between closed, dark, blind arena, and clearly the need to arrive is at the arena. It must be known to oneself and it must be known to others. That is what interpersonal interventions are all about. Can you disclose yourself and be accepted for what you are, just as you are willing to accept others the way they are, and all great religions have practiced this. Ultimately, what do you say in the Durga Aarti? Yatha yogyam tatha kuru. Whatever it is that I deserve, so you do to me. What do you say in our Lord's Prayer? Forgive us as we forgive those that trespass against us. Just understand the nobility of that statement. Forgive us as we forgive those that trespass against us. Yatha yogyam tatha kuru. And there is no way of becoming a better human being than total surrender. You can't claim. It leads to, again, back to a lot of philosophical underpinning for management thought. We don't have the time for it, but I wish you to understand that known by others and known by self is the ultimate revelation. Johari window is used to describe the evolution of work group. When people first meet, their public area or arena is small and closed ranges are large. Over time, however, more and more information moves from closed area to the arena. We will continue this discussion.